All right, you're back with us at goldseek.com radio for another Gold Nugget segment. Today's special guest, Gerald Celente from the Trends Research Institute. Well, news of the LIBOR rate scandal has many top analysts concerned that much smaller markets, like the precious metals, may also be manipulated. Several of my regular guests have been suggesting this for years. Gerald Celente joins me today with his take on the situation and the economy. Gerald is a research analyst, futurist, keynote speaker, and head of the Trends Research Institute. Gerald, I understand the Research Institute moved its offices into a historic building in Kingston, New York.
Well, part of them, yes. We bought a 1750s, the Franz, F-R-A-N-Z, Rogan House, R-O-G-G-E-N. Anybody could go online and see it. We believe that the first, part of the first American Revolution started here, and now it's time for a second American Revolution as we see it. But, of course, one not of bullets and armies, but of, mind and heart. And it's time for a revolution. Anyone that reads the Declaration of Independence knows that according to the Declaration of Independence, it's incumbent upon us to do just that when the nation turns to tyranny. And as you mentioned when you spoke about the LIBOR rate, and when you see the manipulations and everything else that's going on, tyranny is at hand.
Another important document from that era, the Constitution, discusses what real money is. And I thought we could begin our discussion with the precious metals. An interview this week I had with Dr. Ron Paul. He wasn't surprised by the LIBOR scandal. He would be even less surprised if precious metals are being manipulated. Do you share his sentiments?
I feel confident. I mean, how much more proof does anybody need that the game is rigged? Who's ever seen anything like this? First, the Bank of England is involved, allegedly. And then we read that, the Federal Reserve knew about it as well. Back in, 2007, 2008. And the emails went back and forth. Everybody knows what's going on here. The game is rigged. The whole system is corrupt from top to bottom. They say the fish rots at the head, and the fish is rotten. And if anybody can't see it, I just don't know what they're waiting for.
If we can believe the available figures, Gerald, the paper gold market is nearly 100 times the size of physical. Gata.org and others have been insisting this is the case for over a decade, that this paper rigging has opened a window for the powers that be to manipulate the markets. Clearly, by suppressing the best alternative you have to the U.S. dollar, it creates an illusion of dollar strength. What do you think?
This is the greatest heist in history of the 21st century. You know how many minutes it got on American primetime coverage? We're talking what? $800 trillion over here we're talking about being manipulated? In values of what it affected? 800 trillion with a T. The grand total of 12 minutes combined. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, when you put them all together, it comes to 12 minutes of programming and flagship news programs. You know how many times they mentioned it? Of course, everything's being rigged. We're being lied to constantly. How much more proof do people need? And it's not only in finance. How about all that progressive progress you've been hearing about in wars, like the Iraq War and the Afghan War? Everything they touch, these guys, it's a loser. Of course it's rigged. No, I'm not surprised. I've been saying it is. Only to me, you have to be out of your mind to believe what's going on. Look, I got by MF Global. Was the game rigged? Oh, what's his name? Can't find $1.6 billion. John Corzine. Oh, and that other guy, Peregrine, they just got caught. They can't find $200 million. Yeah, of course, everything is rigged. High-frequency trading. Anybody, to me, that plays these markets, stock markets, any of the speculative markets, they're out of their mind. If you don't have your money in your pocket, you don't own it.
Big government has always frowned upon gold because a sound currency forces politicians and monarchs to keep spending under control. It's just unsustainable for half of our society to support the other half from cradle to grave. And when that sound money is in place, it's very difficult, as I mentioned, for them to implement their programs. I think it was Prime Minister Thatcher who said it best regarding socialism. The problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. What do you think?
To me, it's fascism. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. The great story of the EU meetings and the bailouts, the magic money that they're printing, has nothing to do with bailing out the banks of Spain and Portugal and Italy and Greece. No. It has to do with the big news is that they're forming a real central bank where all the nations of Europe are going to lose their sovereignty. It has to do with a central bank just like the U.S. Central Bank, where all our states have lost their sovereignty when they repealed the Glass-Steagall Act and used to have all local banks and you didn't have interstate banking like you have now. No, they didn't bail out the Italian banks and the Greek banks. They bailed out Dexia. It's not that Germans are being so bending and trying to accommodate. No, they're bailing out the French banks like Société Générale and Deutsche Bank, the German banks, the Belgian banks. They're bailing out the banks, the loan sharks of first resort that lent to the loan sharks of second resort. That's all this is. The big banks in Europe loan to the smaller banks in Italy and in Spain, and they can't get their money back. That's all these bailouts are for. So they're pretending that they're bailing out the Spanish, but they're not. They're bailing out the larger banks. It's a banking takeover. We have been warned about it before, and now it has happened.
And you really can't have a banking takeover unless you have a currency hijacked first. And I think that's another problem we have here with sound money is the lack of understanding regarding its monetary status. You know, several generations of Americans have lived in a world devoid of a gold or silver standard. And we can talk all day about gold's 1,000-year monetary reign. But if the only examples are found in dusty history books, most people, I don't think, are going to wake up till it's too late. What do you think?
I think you're right. They're not going to wake up until it's too late. And by the way, the Summer Trends Journal in just a week, and this is the total focus. It's being awake. We go through the European debt crisis, the American debt crisis, what's going on in war, the new Great Depression's coming up. Nomi Prinz, of course, a former managing director of Goldman Sachs, who's on now, of course, saw the corruption, is on the other side. She has a wonderful piece in here. And when you talk about people not understanding it and looking back at gold and it's something in ancient history, let me read you this quote. Of course, it's not mine, but it's in the Trends Journal, but you'll know who it is after I read it. The few who can understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. While, and these are the people you're talking about, on the other hand, the great body of people mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system will bear its burden without complaint and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical to their interests. Rothschild. To answer your question, people are not going to know. It's going to be too late. They knew it. The whole issue of America, you mentioned the Constitution, throughout the entire 1800s was to stop people like Rothschild and the central bankers from taking over the country, not to have a central bank.
Funny you should mention it because in wealth building strategies, that is a point I try to hammer home, standing on the shoulders of folks like yourself and many others who've been pounding the table on this for decades. These were banking wars. And we look back on the War of 1812 as a nostalgic period in our history. And we forget because we were trying to repeal, I believe it was the second or the third central bank of the United States at the time. I think your point is very well made. I wanted to move on here. Hugo, Salinas Price, Max Kaiser, they recently traveled to Greece to promote Mr. Price's silver coin proposal. You may have read of this. Essentially, the government discharges all debt and uses just 5% of their gold reserves to purchase silver to distribute. People can use it as a form of savings. I'd like your thoughts.
Why not? What should we do? Should we keep printing more money to give it to the banking bandits? You know, I mean, they're not accomplishing anything. And by the way, what is the one country, as you well know, that didn't bail out the banks? That's doing just fine right now because they did exactly that, what you just said, in a different way. Iceland. They didn't bail out the banks. They let the banks eat the losses. They bailed out the people. Look at the lies. Look at the lies one after another. Doesn't anybody get it?
It ties right in with another famous Rothschild quote. You might recall what he told all 5 of his sons, most of whom went all throughout Europe and established the banking dynasty. He said, "Sons, if you can't make people love you, make them fear you."
Exactly. Listen to the CEO, the former CEO of Barclays, Bob Diamond, as you were mentioning LIBOR. You know, just a year ago, in front of Parliament, and he castigated the British people for being angry, and he said, quote, "There was a period of remorse and apology. That period needs to be over." These are despicable individuals. They're Rothschilds on steroids, and they're destroying the planet. The LIBOR scandal should be every day in the news. Hey, I wonder what's going on at Penn State. I hear they're going to take down the statue of Joe Paterno. Look at that Sandusky. You know that guy Zimmerman with that Trayvon Williams case. Look what they're doing. Doesn't anybody get it? And then they take you to war.
When it comes to war, nothing greases the wheels in the machine like debt. And according to one leading gold expert, the total debts and exposure in the United States, sit down, hold on to your hat for this one, approaching $500 trillion. Now, I know the number seems impossible, but he includes those weapons of financial mass destruction hidden in plain sight on the balance sheets of Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Wells Fargo. So to get this number in perspective, given our current domestic output of about $15 trillion a year, to pay off all our debts would require only 33 years of effort from every working American and business in this land. So if our country's bankrupt, then the currency, the dollar, must eventually devalue to zero, it would seem. That would make counterparty risk of the utmost importance. So what price tag do you put on gold in that scenario?
Today I did a Trends in the News, and I said I will not forecast the price of gold anymore because the game is so disgustingly rigged. And for all the reasons that you just said, they're going to do everything they can to continue to try to keep down the price of gold. At some time, of course, that's going to run out. I do not give financial advice. I continue to believe in gold, and I certainly believe gold is going to over $2,000 an ounce. And when you put all the pieces together, like you just mentioned, what the real debt level is, and when you see that more than $800 trillion with a T in securities and loans linked to LIBOR, including $350 trillion in swaps, this whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. And to me, only speaking for myself, I don't know why I would not own gold. And a good friend of mine, to me, has the best strategy that I've heard. And I wish it was a strategy that I had employed earlier, but I've been doing it as best I can now. And that is, he buys gold and silver every month. Every month. Every month. And it averages out beautifully.
Exactly. Dollar cost averaging, it's a fantastic way in any bull market to increase your exposure. That way, if prices pull back, you're getting discounted price. If you're breaking out to new highs, you're still in the game. Of course, there's another, I think, possible scenario here that we haven't discussed. If this debt is allowed to implode, this global giant debt bubble that we're seeing, a great deflationary episode would probably envelop the global economy. If we look back at the track record of Western central bankers of the last 40, 50 years, I think it suggests that they would, in a concerted way, get that monetary expansion back into gear. That would be the nostrum of choice. So any period of temporary deflation we see, it seems like would be punctuated by these doses of stimulus, eventually overinflating the global economy. What do you think?
You make a good point, and it could go either way because if the depression and again, there's this wonderful piece that Nomi Prinz is doing in the Trends Journal about the coming Great Depression. If it goes into the level that she sees it going, and you're just going to see commodity prices unravel, and they're not going to be able to pull this out by printing more money. I'll tell you what my concern is, Chris. It's war. And I just think that they're leading us to war. It's the same program that we've seen before. The crash of '29, Great Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War. The panic of '08, we're in the Great Depression. A lot of countries are in depression already. And as a matter of fact, I love the language. They say, will Spain go into another recession? They got 25% unemployment. Go into another recession. Look at the housing market in China. It's down between 20 and 30%. And we from 2009 levels. We have over here, we're down what? 25% from 2006? Is there a depression? Currency wars, they're going on. Trade wars are heating up. World War comes next. So it's very difficult to say what the trajectory is going to be on inflation.
Throw that D word out there, depression, and people start to cringe and say, yes, but where are the soup kitchen, tent cities and everything? And of course, they forget. It's a silent depression. Why? 50 million American homes require food stamps to put food on the dinner table. The powers that be, they learn their lesson from the last depression. If we give them sound bites, if we give them photos of people starving on the streets, then they're going to revolt. Give them nice, shiny little food stamp cards. There's no depression. Nobody's starving. In reality, if the government wasn't providing the jobs, wasn't providing the free food, depression.
You got it, because when you look at the numbers, well, how many jobs? 14 million jobs already been lost?
15% unemployment if you use this U6 number.
And then you look at how many government jobs were lost during that time, and a lot of those were on the edge jobs. So they haven't cut back at all. In the last round of numbers, the government created 4,000 more jobs.
And I want to give you a chance to tell folks any other information on your Trends Journal. As you mentioned, you do have an upcoming edition here.
Our website is trendsjournal.com, trendsjournal.com. The next issue within a week, and I have to say that, or the money-back guarantee. You know, if I could say what you will read in the Trends Journal, you will not find anywhere else on the planet, and you will be prepared for what's coming ahead. You know, this is the perfect grasshopper and ant summer, with all of this heat. You know, people don't want to work hard. They don't want to look at the negativity. You know, come on. Let's have a drink. You know, some lemonade or some Kool-Aid. And if you're not prepared for this winter, you're going to be left out in the cold. This thing is collapsing. And when you watch the presidential reality show and listen to the soundbite solutions of either candidate, and if you're going to believe in them, knock yourself out, because you're going to be knocked out. So I urge everyone to consider subscribing to the Trends Journal money-back guarantee, and if you can't afford the price, because we know a lot of people having a difficult time, simply fill out the discount request form, and we'll do our very best to get it to you at a price that you could afford.
You make a great point. Folks do need to be preparing, and I worry sometimes that the typical listener has been so bombarded by the negative mantra, we're almost sticking our collective heads in the sand. If any one of us is counting on Big Brother to bail us out in our time of need, well, we're going to be sadly mistaken. We've got to start prepping and preparing ourselves and our family and our neighborhoods locally as possible. When the end game plays out, that's going to be all we can count on.
I didn't tell tell you this, but that's the cover of the New Trends Journal and the major theme. There's nobody to help you. You have to do the best you can at every level you can to take care of you. There is no big brother. The only big brother out there is the one that wants to rob you of your courage, your dignity, your respect, and your integrity. It's up to you. You are the final solution.
All right, sir. Well, it's a real pleasure. I can't wait to get a copy of the Trends Journal.
Hey, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.